Hi, my name is Denisha Dillard. I'm going to be talking about um, the most recent assignment that we have, the article about the Golden State Killer. This article was by two young women. I believe their names were Gina Colada and Heather Murphy. Um, Backstory about this article is that they um, found a man that um, was a serial killer. I believe, yeah, serial killer. He committed over 100 crimes across California and used his DNA to find out who he was. Um, that's just to say that your DNA is the most important and personal thing that you have. Um, it carries a lot of history, um, a lot of background and connections for future health risk. But once it's handed over to a testing company or ends up in a database, it's really not yours anymore. So, who controls it? Um, so in 2018, investigators caught the Golden State Killer, a man linked to more than 100 crimes, like I said before, across Cali. Sorry, not across Cali, across California. By uploading the crime scene DNA into a public genealogy database. They didn't match his DNA directly. Instead, they matched it to distant relatives who had submitted their genetic material um, to trace their ancestry. From there, they built a family tree and narrowed it down to suspects and finally identified the killer, Joseph D'Angelo. The case was for justice, but also raised questions, of course. How far should they let law enforcement reach into the genetic data, so on and so forth. So what happens to the DNA profiles? Um, when you send DNA to a testing site company, um, saliva samples can be destroyed after analysis, but the digital profile um, for the genetic code often remains stored. If a company goes out of business, policies vary. In theory, the data should be deleted, but in practice, it may be sold, transferred, uh, uh, or vulnerable. Um, who should have access to these DNA samples? Um, the question is, should the police have access to this? Or should they have unlimited access to consumer DNA databases in the same in the name of solving crimes? Um, or should individuals have the final say over whether the DNA can be used? This is where ethics kind of collide and come into play with the public safety. Um, People argue that the common good, catching murderers, rapists, or exonerating the innocent, outweighs individual privacy. But some fear that it's a slippery slope. It can go either way. In today's database, search might solve a serial killer case, but it could also be used for far less serious crimes or even for surveillance. Oh, sorry, my cat. There may be some middle ground with this, requiring warrants, of course, anytime that there's any kind of investigation. Um, uh, Police, law enforcement, they have to have a warrant to search, certain things, giving consumers clear choices and ensuring independent oversight. Um, but then new things keep emerging. For example, if you have an identical twin, your DNA is effectively the same. Should both of them have to consent before one twin submits to it? Or if a database is hacked and your genetic data is leaked, um, what recourse do we have with that? How do we back that up? Um, there are protections, and some are limited, and genetic identity theft could have long lasting consequences. With the privacy versus justice, the strongest argument for the DNA is justice. Use is justice. DNA evidence is convicted violent criminals who might otherwise walk free and has cleared the wrongly accused. But that does outweigh, or the outcome does justify the potential invasion of privacy for millions who never committed a crime. That's a question that society grapples with. That I had a hard time kind of coming to terms with too with this assignment. Just reading the article and then coming up with this video. It's kind of hard to go back and forth with, to grapple with. Your DNA isn't yours. It's shared with family, and once it's in a database, it could be used in other ways. Should we value the privacy of our safety or the safety of our privacy? That's a good question. Or can we build safeguards that respect both? Does the greater good outweigh individual rights when it comes to DNA? That's just, the DNA that we carry, gosh, like that can go back to different things, like just genetic testing period. I think, with that closing, asking, is our DNA ours? That's kind of scary to think like somebody else could use my DNA. That's why we gotta be careful. But this was a very interesting article to read, to say the least. And it was very interesting to read this. I had to go back a few times to even just go back and reread, and it's very interesting. But I think that is all I have to say.